To our session. Excited to chat with everyone about making digital analytics more strategic at your organization. For those of you like me who are here in the United States, maybe a little bit of a nice reprieve from all of the craziness going on in our current election. So hopefully you can just sit back, relax, take your mind off all the crazy politics stuff for a half an hour, 45 minutes or so, and we'll think a little bit more about digital analytics. So for those of you who I haven't met, once again, my name is Adam Greco, and I've been doing digital analytics for about 20 years now. I was one of the first customers at a little startup that no one had ever heard of called Omniture way back when, and ended up liking their product and joining the company. I was one of the early employees there and helped grow the consulting practice in the United States and over in Europe. And what's kind of cool is I've been on the consulting side, I've been on the product side, and I've also been a customer. So I've seen kind of digital analytics from all different lenses. But I've also done so many implementations of digital analytics that I've learned kind of what works and what doesn't work. I've written many blog posts about digital analytics. Specifically, I focus a lot on Adobe Analytics, and I also wrote the book for Adobe on their product. Currently, I'm a senior director at Search Discovery, and I'm working on a new product we've created called Apollo. So what we're going to do is talk a little bit about how to make digital analytics more strategic at your organization. Now, when I work with companies, this picture probably represents the way that they take a strategic view of digital analytics. A lot of times what we see is organizations that don't really put enough forethought into what they're doing with digital analytics, and it's more like they just kind of throw things at the wall. I like to call this the tag first mentality, where they just tag everything on their website and hope that their poor digital analysts will figure out how to answer the questions that they need. Obviously, this is not a very strategic approach. So what I wanted to share today is how you can kind of think of it a little bit differently. Now, the typical challenges that I see at organizations when I work with them are the following. First of all, business stakeholders generally struggle to figure out what data do we have available in our analytics tool? How do I find it? How do I access it? And if they do find it, what does it actually mean? We also hear a lot of complaints that the digital analytics team is understaffed. Maybe they don't have enough money to buy the tools that are needed. And generally, it's hard to keep up with the workload of all the requests that are coming in. And generally, when I hear that, I know that digital analytics hasn't been strategic at the organization. Because if you are being strategic, you generally don't have to worry about having headcount or tools and money that you need. And I'm going to hopefully share ways to solve that. I also hear a lot about the fact that digital analytics data is not trusted within the organization, and we're going to talk about how to solve that. But the biggest overarching theme I hear is that executives complain that they're just not seeing the value out of their investment in digital analytics. And that is a killer. Obviously, you want your executives to be happy, you want them to get value from all the things that you or your team are doing. So these are the challenges that we're going to try to solve today. We're going to talk about some techniques to deal with that. Now, if you are encountering some of these challenges, I want you to feel a little bit more comforted by the fact that you are not alone. Every company thinks that they're doing terrible or they're doing great, but usually neither is true. But more often than not, I see companies that think they're the only ones that are struggling with these challenges. And a lot of times when I work with them, they're happy and I act a little bit as like a therapist for them and let them know it's not just you. A lot of people have these struggles. Now, one of the reasons I know this for a fact, and I'll tell you a little story, is when I worked at Omniture way back when, I got the nickname of the Wolf of Omniture, if you will. So if any of you who ever seen the Pulp Fiction movie, where I'm showing a little image from here, Harvey Keitel plays a very colorful character called the Wolf. And the Wolf's job is to go in when something has gotten really screwed up or really bad and save the day and fix the situation. The last role that I had when I worked at Omniture was to receive the phone calls when a customer was really having a rough time with, back then it was called Omniture Site Catalyst, now Adobe Analytics, and they were just either they wanted to get rid of it or things weren't going well. I would either get on the phone or get on an airplane and go deal with them, which was kind of an interesting job. Put a lot of wear and tear. I used to have a lot more hair back then. Because of this role, I don't. But basically, at the end of the day, I got to see hundreds of companies that were basically screwing up digital analytics and got a front row seat to that. And because of that, I was able to learn a lot of the things that people do wrong. So that's why I make presentations like this, because I want to let you know you're not alone, and I want to share tips to try to not have to ever see a wolf-like character like me. So let's dig in. The first thing I always recommend that analytics teams do is take a step back and ask themselves, is your analytics team a profit center or a cost center? And by that, what I really mean is your team there to just, run reports, or is it to actually generate ROI for your company? Obviously, if you're a cost center, then you're just kind of doing the day-to-day stuff of digital analytics, and your company is investing in it, but they're investing in it the same way as they're investing in the phones, in the website, in the chairs, the desks that you have at the company. You're just a cost. And cost centers generally don't get more headcount, and they don't get a lot of resources, and they don't get money for tools. And if you think about it, when your company first thought about buying a digital analytics tool, their goal was not to just add more cost to the company. They were buying either an Adobe Analytics or a similar tool to basically say, we're going to use this tool as a profit center to make more money for our organization. We expect to get an ROI from that. The problem is so many of us have had digital analytics for years that we almost forget about why the company first bought digital analytics, and we get a little bit lazy and we don't think about generating ROI. So if we dig into the details here, the way that you determine if you are a cost center or a profit center is to be honest with yourself and think about your team and say, over the last month, over the last year, how much of the time that I was spending or my team was spending is on simply just running reports and answering questions that people have, versus doing more strategic analysis, which is, really trying to figure out what's happening on our website and how do we solve problems and how do we get more people to convert. And an analogy that I like to use is the thermometer and thermostat analogy. Most organizations, the digital analytics team is more of a thermometer, which is it's great. It tells you what the temperature is right now. You can use it to figure out what the temperature was last week, maybe compare, is this week warmer than last week? But a thermostat is a totally different type of device, still related to weather, but you can spin the dial left or right, and you can either make it colder or warmer. Companies that are really good at digital analytics are more like thermostats, where they can jack up conversions or they can, reduce bounces and stuff like that. And if you're a profit center, you're more of a thermostat than if you're just running reports, and you're more like a thermometer. And another important thing that I've always done when I've worked at a company doing analytics is I've tried to actually put into a spreadsheet, what is the ROI of my team? Now, to be honest, you have to add up the cost you pay every year for your analytics tools. Then you have to add up all the costs of your team, and maybe even a partial cost of the business users who you work with pretty frequently. And that could add up. That could be, $1 million, $2 million, depending on the size of your organization. And now you've got to say to yourself, do you actually generate savings or increased revenue for the company based on the website or mobile app to compensate for your team and still have some money left over? So if you use kind of the analogies and the examples I'm giving here, I'm going to give you a quick poll here that Dawn's going to shoot for us. I want you to be honest with yourself, and you can do this anonymously, but I want you to say whether or not you believe your team is strategic or just being more of a reporting. Are you more of a thermostat or a thermometer? And I've given you a couple choices here that you can answer. And, be honest with yourself. It'll also help me kind of gear this presentation. So I'll give that a couple of seconds, and then Dawn, you'll let me know when you get a quorum of results, and then you'll
All
share that
right.
with us.
Just 2 more seconds. Votes are still coming in. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close the polling. And here are the results.
Okay, awesome. So we have about half of the group is under 50% strategic, even more than that. So probably 60, but 55% or so is not being as strategic as they probably would like, and that's probably right. That makes sense. So cool, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So if we do agree that maybe we want to be a little more strategic, how do we get there? So, the first problem that we want to solve is the way that people have been told about using digital analytics has honestly been wrong from the start. And it all starts with this thing that's called the dreaded SDR, or solution design reference. Many of you have this, whether you use Adobe or another tool, you probably have an SDR. And an SDR is typical of an analytics implementation that just lists out all of the data points that you are collecting. If you're an Adobe customer, it'll list out your events, EVARs, SPROPs, and so on. And this is what most of us have been brought up to believe. If we have an implementation and we want to figure out how to answer questions at our organization, we figure out what data we're going to collect and then we put it into a spreadsheet. But unfortunately, SDRs are part of the problem, not the solution. An SDR tells you what you're doing, but not why. And that is not how you're going to be strategic. You really want to focus on the why you're doing things. And an SDR is more of a technical document that helps the implementation team, but it does really nothing for your end users and your business users. Not to mention the fact that most SDRs are completely outdated. Whenever I work with a company, I find that a lot of times it's not even current. So the first problem I find with a lot of companies is that they're really driving their whole implementation by an SDR. So I want to kind of present a different model and a different way for you to think about doing your implementation. And that starts with website or mobile app objectives. And you may have both a website or a mobile app, but some companies, one is more important than the other. Now, when you think about the objectives, what I want you to do, not right now, but kind of when you go back afterwards and think about this, is I want you to take a step back and say, why in the heck do we have a website? Why do we have a mobile app? Because the problem is we've been so used to having our website or mobile apps for so long that we forget that there was an actual reason why we have them. How would your business suffer if you didn't have a website or a mobile app? And if you do that, it really helps you to kind of see the forest for the trees. And what I want you to do is I want you to write down maybe the 5 or 10 reasons why you have a website to begin with. And I know it sounds really basic and elementary, but when I work with companies and I ask them, why do you have a website to begin with? Honestly, I don't get really good answers. And so if you think about that as the objectives, you wouldn't do anything in business without understanding why are we even doing it in the first place. So if you think of it that way, I'll give you an example of what an objective might be. And this is from one of my financial service clients. So they took some time and they said, well, why do we have a website? And this is just one of the objectives, was we want to save the organization money by enabling our customers or visitors to perform actions online that would otherwise cost us a lot more money if they did it in other channels, maybe in person in a branch or over the phone. Now, by having that high level objective, that can then be broken down into sub objectives. And so I have the first objective here, the sub objective of we want to thus allow customers to deposit money, transfer money, perform trades, do all this online because that reduces the cost of our headcount at branches, and maybe we don't even have to have as many branches. A second sub-objective might be we want to have a venue for prospects to learn about our financial products, and that can happen 24/7, 365 days. It's not just when our office is open, and have a way that they can reach out via email or chat and maybe talk to us if they have questions. Maybe a third sub-objective is we want to get a way so people can apply for products anytime they want and really minimize the friction and minimize the human intervention. And then lastly, we might want to provide online support via maybe FAQs or chat and that can cut costs when it comes to our overall support costs. So this seems pretty basic, but I promise you, and I won't put any of you on the spot, if I asked you right now to email me a document that said, can you show me your 5 to 10 objectives for your website, and then show me maybe 4 or 5 sub objectives underneath each of those, I would hazard a guess that very few of you would be able to send me a document that has that today. And I'm not faulting you, it's just we get busy, and a lot of you probably inherited an analytics implementation that you didn't create. So I think you should really go back to the basics and start by defining these objectives. And you could use this as just one example of a format for that. Now, once you have objectives and sub-objectives, the next step is business requirements. And I'm going to talk a lot about business requirements today because I am a big believer in business requirements. I believe that each objective can be broken down into business requirements, and business requirements help you define the specific questions that you want to be able to answer through your investment in tools like Adobe Analytics. But most importantly, business requirements provide a really useful bridge between the executives and the business folks at your company and your analytics team, and more importantly, the technical developers that are going to have to get involved in tagging. Business requirements is what you should be using to drive your analytics implementation, not an SDR. So to illustrate that, let's look at the same example we were just talking about a minute ago. So in this case, we have the high level objective of saving the organization money by doing stuff online. And I'm just going to look at just the very first sub objective, which is allowing customers to do transactions online. Well, if we take that sub-objective, think about what we would want to know as a digital analyst to support that sub-objective. And there's many more, but I just threw out a couple examples that came to my head in literally under 2 minutes. How often are customers performing self-service transactions? That's an easy thing to know. We can quantify that in Adobe Analytics and see how we're supporting that sub-objective. If they are doing self-service, which types of transactions are taking place online and which aren't taking place? So are they doing maybe deposits online, but there's other transactions that they're not doing online? That might mean that if we educate people in the branch that they can do stuff online, maybe they won't come to the branch next time. Since we have people in this case logged into a bank or financial institution, we might know which customers are performing or not performing self-service transactions. If we see that there's some people who are doing just a little bit but not doing as much as they can online, maybe we can educate them or market to them or send them an email and say, did you know that you could save yourself a trip to the bank? You could do all this stuff online. And then since a lot of times we know things like geography and browser and all this crazy stuff in analytics tools, we might even say, could we see by state or city where these transactions are taking place so we can kind of adjust as needed? Now, I could probably go on and come up with many more business requirements, but you see that there's a pattern. We've got a high level objective, then a sub objective, and now we get down to business requirements. Well, now let's look at what happens if you don't do the correct approach. If you take the SDR approach, which is what most people do, and your boss comes to you and says, hey, we need to reduce costs of providing real-time chat to customers. So we're going to do real-time chat to reduce costs. If you don't think about objectives or business requirements, you might just say, okay, we're going to have a developer give us a new metric called chat started. Then we're going to do a new metric called chats engaged when they start engaging with the chat. And then we'll do a dimension to get the purpose of the chat. And that's fine. That's what a lot of people do. But if you do that, how are your users going to know what to do with those metrics and with that particular dimension that you've made? The business requirements approach would look more like this, which is before we do any tagging, we are going to upfront think about what are the questions related to this objective that we want to solve. Maybe how often times are they doing a chat? What is the chat to visit ratio? Maybe what pages, we want to know what pages they're on when they resort to chat. Maybe those pages aren't very good. What flows on our website are leading to chat? What types of questions are they asking in chat, and can we get better content? I had one client who said, listen, I want to know how often they're doing chat within 5 minutes of doing an on-site search on my website, because that's a good indicator that my website search is probably bad and they gave up and they resorted to chat. So This is kind of the different approach. Instead of just thinking of everything in terms of, I'm going to just set metrics and dimensions, if you think of these in terms of requirements, it's a little easier for your end users once you have the data, but more importantly, you might actually identify more things you want to tag once you flush out all the questions that you want to answer. So I'm going to ask Dawn to launch our second poll now. So the second poll, what I want to know is, if you're being honest, and you can do this anonymously, do you feel that you have a list of business requirements that map to your objectives that you have gotten verified and approved and signed off by your executives at your company? And this only works if you're honest, so be honest with us.
Okay, the tallies are slowing down. About 2 more seconds. All right.
Okay, so we have about 35% of you said that you do have business requirements, and that's great, and about 65% don't. So that sounds about right. And again, those of you who are doing it, I'm going to show you some ways today to maybe even enhance what you're doing. And those of you who aren't, I'm going to show you how you can get there. So if you're part of the group that doesn't have business requirements, let's figure out, how do we get business requirements? So a lot of times I find people don't have business requirements because they just haven't done it before. They're not sure of really the process, but it really isn't that difficult, and it just takes a little bit of upfront work. So what's the process for creating business requirements if you don't have them today? So this is kind of the Adam Greco approved. I'm sure there's other approaches, but this is the Adam Greco approach. What I want you to do after this webinar is, I want you to look at your SDR, because you probably have one, and I want you to reverse engineer it. Think of it as if you're playing Jeopardy and you're turning your SDR into the form of a question. I want you to look at every data point and write down every possible business question that you think you could solve for each of those data points, and just start putting them down into a spreadsheet. Then I want you to look at your team and maybe look at all the questions you've gotten in the last couple months. I don't know if you have a logging system for questions you get from users, or just use, think about what people have asked you in the last couple months. And I want you to write those down in addition to what you have from the questions from your SDR. Then I want you to actually use your website as a customer. Navigate the website, or if you're too close to your website to be objective, maybe ask your friends or relatives or partner to go through the website. And as they're using the website, think about what questions they might have, or ask them what questions they have, and add those to the list. So if you take everything from your SDR, everything that your team has always wanted to know, and then you use your website and add all those, you might end up with 50 or 100 questions. Then I want you to deduplicate that list and then categorize the questions. Maybe put all of the search ones together, maybe put all of the campaign ones together, all of the content ones together. That just makes it easier when you sort them to be able to see similar questions next to each other. And then, if possible, I want you to prioritize each of the questions. And at this point, you could just do kind of high, medium, low in terms of importance, and that's it. I just want you to make a spreadsheet that has all that. Now, when you're done, you might have a spreadsheet that looks a little bit like this. You've got your business requirements, and then what you've got here is, you've got the category that I mentioned. You maybe put similar ones together, and you can make whatever categories you want. The other thing that's really useful is to tie these business requirements to the business objectives that we originally created. So hopefully you only have 5 or 10 business objectives, so you can line up every business requirement with every objective. Now, I also recommend that, if possible, you think about documenting what is the benefit to the organization of answering this question. Because sometimes you may have too many business requirements, and a lot of times people say they want to know something, but they can't actually tell you why they want to know it. So if you do have too many questions, then asking a simple pushback question of, what are you going to do with the answer to this question? If they can't give you a good answer, I would maybe move that to a lower priority. But then You should assign an owner to every business requirement. Who's the person who cares the most about this requirement? And if you have questions about anything related to this requirement, maybe when it comes to tagging, who's the person you can go to and talk to? Because if you do that during the requirements gathering, that's really helpful later. Now, once you have that list of business requirements, the next thing that I want you to do is be honest and score your business requirements. Now, when I say scoring them, I basically mean on a scale of like 4, which I'm using the Harvey Balls font here, which is a 4 versus a 0, 1, 2, 3. I want you to think about, do we have the data points we need to answer this business requirement? And is that do we have it as, halfway, not? And is the data quality good that you would trust it? So here I've got a fake example where I've got some requirements that I gave a full credit, some half credit, some partial credit. And then what I like to do is score at the top. For example, you'll see that 56% is just an average score, which is how many requirements do we have divided by, a 4 being the perfect score, multiplying that and just dividing by the number of requirements. The 33% I have here is basically how many of all of my requirements are a 4 out of a 4, can be totally done. And this may be a little bit depressing when you first start, but I highly recommend you do this so you see where you are today when it comes to all your business requirements. And if you've added a lot of new business requirements, don't feel too bad. You should have a lot that have zeros because those are brand new and you haven't implemented anything for that yet. Now, once you do all that, you can start to finally make the solution design document a little more useful, making it what I call a requirements-driven SDR. So a requirements-driven SDR is one where you actually take your business requirements and you map it to the data points that are in your implementation. Now, the way I do this is I tend to, in the past, always use a spreadsheet where I document all the different variables, and then I just use a quick formula to basically merge together all the variables related to each business requirement. And there's a couple of cool tricks why this is useful. But here you can see that you've got a business requirement. You can see how many data points are needed and which data points are needed. And then you can also see how many requirements each data point is used in if you look at the numbers going across the top in the middle. So this is a powerful way because now for the first time, you can actually see what data points in your implementation are supporting which business requirements. That is really powerful. And it means that your old solution design that just told you what you were doing can be thrown out. Now you've got both the what and the why, which is really cool. So now we've got our objectives, we've got our requirements, and now we know what data points we need. And now we can start actually doing tagging. But before we do tagging, there's one more tip I'll give you. Because we have in our new solution design document how many requirements each variable goes with, and we have priority, what's really cool is we can slice and dice and sort and filter this sheet. So we can say, you know what, I'm going to have my developers work on the variables that satisfy the most number of requirements. So for example, in this one, chat initiated is part of 7 requirements. So that might be one I want to do first. Or I can filter to just look at ones that are priority, like critical or important, as I'm showing at the bottom here, and ones that aren't done, aren't 4 out of a 4. So both lenses give you a way to prioritize where you want to focus your development efforts. Now, next thing I want to talk about is knowing your tool. So this is another thing that I found over the years that has hindered people from being strategic with digital analytics. And the reason this is a problem is because if you don't know how to fully use your tool, it becomes really difficult to translate your business requirements into analytics tool solution designs. And this is a lot of times a problem because employees at your company, maybe they've only been part of 1 or 2 Adobe implementations of analytics. So maybe they're not experts or maybe they're not certified. Unfortunately, there's no generally accepted or shared industry best practices when it comes to here's the best way to implement this or that. And I've seen this. I've done tests where I've had a client and I've given them multiple people at the same company to tell me, for example, how they would do cross-sell tracking. And a lot of times, if I ask 5 people, I'll get 5 different answers. And every analytics tool has its own little quirks. But if you don't know how to actually implement the right way in your tool that you're spending probably a lot of money on, then all of the work we've done so far for objectives and requirements and solution designing kind of goes out the window. So definitely make sure you know the tool or you have resources that you can lean on to know your tool. Finally, Now we can get to the point where we can implement. And this is the easy part. There's nothing strategic about this. This is just you actually getting the tagging done. But I wanted to bring up one really interesting point. You notice that we are, pretty significantly into this webinar, and we are now only talking about implementing. Take a step back and think about, how does it normally work? Well, normally we just start implementing day one, and then we try to figure out how to make sense of all the data later. We are purposely doing this in a very methodical way. So if you are doing it my way, you won't do as much tagging as you've done in the past, because you're going to be much more strategic about your tagging, and you're going to only tag exactly what you need. Now, once you're done with tagging, another thing that trips up companies and makes them not be as strategic as they can with analytics is the fact that the data quality is not that great. And data quality is kind of like the elephant in the room when it comes to digital analytics. No one wants to talk about it, but everyone knows that they have data quality issues. The big ones I tend to see is where you've got missing or incomplete data, where all of a sudden you've got data and it just disappears. I see this a lot when companies like have a new website redesign and suddenly the analytics team wasn't told about it and tags just get dropped. I also see a lot of problems where the actual values that are being passed into analytics tool variables aren't very good, and they're not using a standard naming convention, so no one knows what to do with that, or there's just junk data. And then, as I mentioned, other data quality issues come in when companies don't know their analytics tool, as I mentioned, and maybe they don't do the settings the right way, like maybe not using merchandising evars when they should. Now, unfortunately, if you want to solve data quality issues, you've got to get buy-in from your executives to say, hey, we need to spend more time, we need more headcount, or we need to pay for third-party tools that can help us with data quality. And unfortunately, executives don't give a crap about data quality most of the time. They just don't give it the attention. And that's because no executives go to bed at night worrying about EVAR 5 being messed up or success event 10 being messed up. They just don't think about that. They think of more high-level things. But here's a cool tip. Since we have done the hard work already of making a solution design document that's requirements driven, we know which data points support each objective and each business requirement. So what's really cool is this is another benefit, another dividend of taking my approach. If in this example, we realize that we have a data quality issue with event 12, or maybe EVAR 12 and event 12 that have to do with on-site search or maybe chat, we can go to our executives and say, listen, one of the high-level objectives you told us about is you want to improve customer satisfaction score. In order to do that, we have a bunch of business requirements that we are trying to get the answer to help us, to help you to improve your customer sat score. But unfortunately, right now, we can't do that because we're having some data quality issues. And I have found that if you can tie the data quality issues to the requirements, but more importantly, the executive level business objectives, suddenly executives care about it because now it's affecting them. And I don't want to disparage executives, but this is just what I've seen in the real life. Now it affects them. Then I found you've been more successful in getting the resources, money, headcount, whatever you need to actually address the data quality issues. And the reason why data quality is critical is if people don't trust the data you have in your analytics implementation, they're not going to use your data, they're not going to use your reports. And how can you be strategic if no one's using your information? So the next thing I want to talk about is conducting analysis. And how do we conduct analysis strategically? So a couple tips I'll give you here is, believe it or not, everything we've talked about now, once you've implemented and gone through all this, you're not done. Most people think that once they're done with the implementation, they can just go take a vacation. The truth is, you're only at the starting line now, because you only make value out of digital analytics when you actually use the data to some benefit. So don't take your eye off the ball. Realize that once you get good data and you've got all of your variables set and all of the requirements ready to be analyzed, now you're at the starting line. The other tip that I'll give you is I want you to focus all of your analysis on the items that are most directly related to your KPIs. I like to think of this as working your way backwards. So for example, if you're a retailer, I would always start your analysis on what's happening in the shopping cart. Of all the times that people are putting things in the shopping cart, how often are they not able to purchase, and figure out how you solve those problems, because those are the people who are most closely related to your KPI. If you're a B2B company, it might be how many people are viewing my form, my lead form on the website and not completing it. And what could I do to nudge them? Because those are the people who got closest to my KPI. So I like to always kind of work backwards. And then I also, once I've solved those problems, then I'll kind of skip the middle and go to the front and say, okay, now let's look at people who are first coming to my website and where are they either bouncing or taking a wrong turn. I see a lot of people who don't know where to start, and my advice is to start at the end and then maybe go to the beginning. And I focus a little less on the middle. The other thing I'd recommend is that you think of digital analytics as like the scientific method. I want you to always be coming up with questions. Why is this not happening the way we want it to happen? Why are they not buying? Why are they not filling out a form? And then come up with hypotheses that you can test. Try new things, test out new things using maybe Adobe Target, and figure out where can we make significant gains. And if you think of yourself like a scientist, you'll really do well. And then remember always that your team only generates ROI once you've taken the data and you've actually made a change on the website, and that change has a positive impact. And that's how you can become a profit center, as we talked about earlier. And so always think about not reporting on the past, but how can we use hypotheses and changes that we make on the website to change the future? And I can tell you, when I worked at Salesforce.com as head of analytics, most of the stuff we did when I first started was just running reports, but we eventually shifted so that 90% of what we were doing was our team working with stakeholders to figure out what could we change on the website to improve conversion. It's much more fun, it's much more exciting, and I can tell you that your employees will get much more energized when something changes on the website that helps the business because of data that they analyze. It is a really cool way to keep employees and get them happy. So let's kind of summarize what we've talked about here.
Hey, Adam.
First, yep. Yep.
Hey, I was just going to jump in. We've got a couple questions coming in chat, and before you go to too many slides, I wanted to read them to you. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. I was going to summarize what we've covered so far, but go ahead.
Oh, this is the last slide. Okay.
Yeah, this is the last slide. So I was going to
Yeah,
summarize
no,
this and
no.
then open it up some questions.
Yeah, you're totally good. We've got some coming in, so we'll wait.
Cool. Yeah. So just to summarize, first thing I want you to do, decide if you're honest with yourself, are you a cost center or profit center? And I want you to think about that. Second, I want you to stop thinking of things by an SDR, and I want you to think about what are your high-level website and app objectives. Then I want you to think about, are you willing to go all in on with me on business requirements? And if so, I want you to follow the steps I gave you to create your business requirements. Once you've done that, be honest with yourself and score how many of the business requirements can you answer effectively today, and then use the prioritization if you need to up that score. Make a new version of your SDR to basically be a requirements-driven SDR. Use that to figure out where should you focus your development efforts, because you usually only get brief periods of time with your development team. And then in parallel, make sure that you're either knowing your tool, or if you need to bring in outside people, whatever you need to do to make sure that you're actually solution designing the requirements the right way. Don't forget about data quality. And when it comes to doing analysis, make sure you're doing analysis strategically. So I have some other content, some other bonus content I'll share, but let's pause and take a couple questions.
Great. So, Adam, do you have any pricing structure for agencies to charge for analytics services?
Unfortunately not. I've done a lot of consulting in this. I think most agencies are more comfortable with the tagging side. I have found that you have to really make sure you're working with a right agency when it comes to identifying your business requirements and your objectives, because it takes a little bit of a different mindset. But I think that most of this stuff is stuff that you should be able to do on your own. But if whoever asked that question, maybe if you want to maybe give me a little more context, I'm more than happy to. If you want to email me, I'll put my email address up at the end. I'm more than happy to either jump on the phone or chat with you about that.
Great, thanks. And then we've got a few more. Can you share present practices to make QA efficient? And do you have any recommendations around automations?
Yeah, so QA is an interesting area. My advice around QA is wherever possible, if you can automate it, that is ideal. And there's vendors out there who do that. And I'm actually in some of the bonus content I'm going to share about a tool that we're making that actually does a little bit about that as well. But the other thing that I would recommend is don't think of QA as something that happens once a month or once a quarter. You should really think of QA as something that needs to be happening all the time. And it was interesting. When I bought my first house, the people I bought it from gave me some advice, which I thought was really interesting. They said, if you want to keep the house looking good on the outside, paint 1/4 of the house every year. And they said that way it doesn't break the bank. It's not very expensive. And you know that you've painted a little bit each year and you're being consistent in it. And I don't know if that's the best approach with painting a house, but I actually like that advice when it comes to data quality, because I see so many companies who say, we're going to check data quality all the time. And then they never do it. And then they do a big bang check of data quality. But I would take, if you have 100 variables in your implementation, I would maybe check 10 every week and have someone check those 10, and that every 10 weeks every data point has been checked. Or if you want to have it less than that, every 5 weeks check 20 data points, and just come up with a system to do that.
Okay, I've got one more. Documentation is key for Adobe Analytics implementation. Can you guide how it can be dynamic as a process?
Yeah, so that was probably a plant. So actually what I was going to do then is I wanted to spend a couple minutes talking a little bit about the technology that I've been working on for a year to solve a lot of the problems that we talked about in this session. So give me a couple minutes. I'm going to just go through really quickly to talk about that, and then I'll come back to that. So because I've seen this problem so often, when I joined Search Discovery, the reason I joined Search Discovery is I got tired of companies doing digital analytics the wrong way. And I think that it's really difficult to do digital analytics for a lot of the reasons we talked about today. And so I've been working with the team at Search Discovery to build a product called Apollo that some of you may have heard about. We actually just won an award a week or so ago by the Digital Analytics Association for the best new technology of the year. And here's what Apollo does, and it aligns perfectly with what we've talked about today. The first thing is we actually built into Apollo over 1,000 business requirements. We don't have objectives in there yet because those are a little bit different for every company, but we've put 1,000 business requirements out there. So instead of you having to guess at what you can do with analytics tools like Adobe Analytics, you literally can go into Apollo and you can just check off which business questions you want to answer. And we have ways that you could filter them by vertical or by the different functions of your website. I've literally taken every blog post I've ever written and every implementation I've ever done and put it into the form of a question here. And we found that about 90% of all implementations that we've looked at are already covered in terms of business requirements in Apollo. So if you don't want to take the time and figure out what your business requirements are, you could use Apollo and just use the library of business requirements we've made. Another thing I mentioned in this presentation was a lot of people don't know the right way to make solution designs for business requirements because they're not Adobe Analytics experts. Maybe they haven't written a book like I have. So we actually built into Apollo the best practice solution design for every business requirement. So whether you know Adobe Analytics or you don't, the minute you check off a business requirement, we automatically turn on all the solution design that you need. The only thing you have to tell us is which variable number you want to put it in, EVAR 5, event 10. We take care of all the solution designing for you. The other thing that we do is we automatically build your data layer and your tagging specs for you, because why should you have to reinvent the wheel? We programmatically build this for you in Apollo, and then we let you publish this out to tools like GitHub. So your developers will only implement exactly what they need to. And this is dynamic. So as you add requirements, it automatically builds and augments your data layer, which is really cool. And then we took it one step further and we actually integrated with Adobe Launch so that you can push a button and Apollo will automatically configure and build out your entire launch instance in under 2 seconds. So here you see on the screen that if I literally push the blue button, it will build out the entire launch instance in a couple of seconds. So no manual work. You don't have to worry about developers screwing up or making mistakes or putting the wrong data layer element to the wrong EVAR. All of this is done by Apollo for you with full version control. And then the question came up around QA. We actually do QA at the data layer level through a new launch extension that we've built with Apollo. So we actually check every data point coming through through Adobe Launch, and we flag any cases in Apollo where there's a data quality issue. What's really cool about that is it means that we can tell you which business requirements are currently broken because of a data quality issue, because Apollo is built on a complete relational database, so we know how it all comes together. And then we also automatically create analysis workspace dashboards for all of the business requirements that you have selected with full help and full tables of data. So we automatically push this out to Adobe Analytics for you. So we go straight from business requirement to tagging to analysis workspace. And the cool part about Apollo is instead of you running your implementation by spreadsheets or Word documents or third-party QA tools, you have everything in one integrated place. And that's why I'm really excited about this, because I've just seen how the process is just really complicated. And we're excited to really kind of bring this product to the market. We call it an analytics management system because it really does help you manage everything in your implementation outside of the tag management part, which it integrates with. So some of the stuff we talked about today is directly related. And I've literally been taking the presentation we had today and been trying to build that into software so that it becomes easier for people in the future to not have to do all of this through different documents and by hand. So I'm going to leave, that's really all the content we want to share. We want to leave the rest of the time for any other questions. And while we go through questions, I'm going to leave my contact information. And if you have a phone, you could point your phone at my QR code and that will actually take you to my LinkedIn profile if you want to connect. But I'm going to leave the rest for questions.
Yeah, Adam, I've got two more that I need to address. Let's see, I want to make sure I didn't miss the one from earlier. So Bamini had asked, do you have any defined strategies for using analytics, or could you use any diversified field? If yes, how is it used in education and training purposes? Did I read that correctly? Did it make sense to you?
Hold on, I might need to see that. I'm not sure I got that.
Yeah,
Can we do it one more time?
Yeah, I'm gonna Slack it to you directly.
Okay.
So you don't, because it's from earlier, and I don't want you to have to scroll up too much.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I completely got that question.
Do you see it where I Slacked it to you? Or where I
nope.
chatted to you?
Okay, so do you have any defined strategies for using analytics? Yeah, so basically the stuff that we're talking about today could be used in any type of field and any type of vertical. So obviously we focus here in the digital analytics space. I've actually had customers who said, hey, I really like the process you've gone through here for an implementation based on objectives and business requirements. Can this be applied to CRM and other things? For sure. And the same process can be applied to any type of analytics tool. Obviously, I spend most of my time in Adobe Analytics, so that's why I showed examples for Adobe Analytics.
And then if yes, can we run validation after a week for all the implementations that we've done?
Yeah, I mean, you can always do validation as often as you want, and you can validate different report suites and variables within different report suites.
Here is a great one on Apollo, wondering if it's compatible with Google Analytics, since we're only been touching on Adobe Analytics, but I know you've got some insight into that, Adam.
Yeah, Apollo is available for both. To be honest, we are a little further along with Adobe because Adobe does have some functionality in the product that allows it to satisfy more business requirements. Then there's some that are a little harder to do with Google Analytics. Maybe that might change in the future with Google Analytics 4. But again, most of the stuff we're doing right now is in the Adobe world. And we also hear a lot of companies looking to move to the new Adobe platform. So we're also using Apollo as a way to transition people from the old version of Adobe Analytics to either the new version CJA or completely over to platform. But it is in our roadmap to be able to have parity with Google Analytics, but there are just some things that we found that are a little easier to do in Adobe than Google.
And then Irun had asked a question, which I switched the two of these, but asked, does Apollo support native app implementation and automated app validation? And then if yes, can we run validation a week after the implementations that we've done?
Yeah, it does part of that. We don't tend to do the week after. We're more focused on the data as it's coming in to see if the data is correct in the data layer or not. Because in the Adobe world, you can then push those off to the side and not corrupt your data and have bad data in Adobe Analytics. And then later you could feed that data through once it's been fixed. That's one of the cool things you can do, especially with the Adobe platform. So we're not, right now, Pollo doesn't do like the spidering technology of going out and spidering your site and making sure all the tags are there and populating values on forms. There's other vendors that do that. We're more focused on making sure that the data that's coming in the data layer is pristine so that you have trust in your Adobe Analytics program.
And a question about how someone can learn more detail about Apollo features, apart from an education point of view. Is there any sandbox environment available?
There isn't, but I do one-on-one demos for people who want to check it out. So if you go to the apolloplatform.com, you could sign up for a demo with me. And then once we do a demo, we have some opportunities for you to kind of play around with the tool. So for sure.
Yep. And everyone, I had posted that link in the chat. I just did it again, so you don't have to scroll, but we will also be emailing this link out to everybody. So you can sign up for the demo there. Let's see. Man, these are really rolling in, guys. I love all of these questions that you're all putting in here. Does Apollo also support other Adobe solutions like Adobe Target?
Partially, yeah, partially. There are some ways that we can integrate to help you to put stuff in Adobe Target, but really with Adobe Target, it's really just putting your MBox there. So definitely on the roadmap to do more integration. It definitely takes in all of the variables like A for T variables into Adobe Analytics and are accounted for there as well.
And how can Apollo guard against false alerts or alert fatigue?
Yeah, Apollo doesn't really have alerts. It more checks data quality and lets you know behind the scenes if there's data quality issues. The alert functionality in Adobe Analytics, I understand what you're saying. That could be kind of problematic at times because you end up getting all your alerts on weekends. Really, Apollo, we're just trying to help you implement your Adobe implementation better. We don't replace any of the Adobe Analytics functionality. So if you're worried about alert fatigue in your reports, you'd probably want to talk to Adobe, but we're hoping to not have to have as many of those alerts by checking the data quality as it comes in.
All right. And if you have business requirements not found among the 1,000 pre-configured, can you also build your own custom requirements and have them monitored all the way through the data layer, just like the pre-configured ones?
Yes, good question. Yes, absolutely. We have a facility for us to add any question. We just have a process that we want you to go through where you can set it up the right way. So you have the right solution design so that it ends up going into your tagging specs and into launch and everything else. All of that is built into Apollo, and we even help on our team work with you if you have new ones that you want to add, just to make sure you're doing it the right way. So you get to potentially work with people like me to do custom requirements that you have. But like I said, we have found that about 90% of the time we already have something that meets the need that you're looking for. So it's usually pretty much of an edge case. And as we get more and more companies up on Apollo, we're probably going to end up getting that down to 5% of the time you're going to have something we don't already have before.
And hold on, let me make sure I don't miss it. Does Apollo support mobile native app implementation?
It doesn't right now, but that is coming very soon. We're waiting for Adobe to kind of finish up all of their stuff on their new AEP mobile SDK, and then we are going to be kind of piggyback with that. So we are currently working with the product management team at Adobe to get that out as soon as we possibly can. So I love all the Apollo questions, but I feel like our little turn to Apollo at the end. Are there any questions on the 45 minutes of content that we shared before we did a little Apollo commercial?
I had one sent to me. I know we've only got a few minutes. I did have one sent to me privately. Going back to your original analogy, the thermostat and the thermometer, if your company is more of a thermometer than a thermostat, how do you help them make that transition?
Yeah, good question. That's one that I actually faced myself when I worked at Salesforce.com. As I mentioned, my first week on the job, I realized that 90% of what we were doing was thermometer work. So what we did is, first of all, we did the whole requirements thing. We figured all that out. We did our prioritization. And then what we did is we took all of the questions we were getting that were recurring questions, and we put them into a couple of really massive dashboards where there wasn't really an action they were looking to take. They just wanted to be updated. So is in general, I'm not a huge fan of just giving people dashboards, but if it's a question they don't really feel passionate about, and it's not one that they're going to be strategic about changing the website, they just want to know how something's doing, that is actually a good use case for a dashboard. So it took us a long time, about 2 months, to create these really cool dashboards. Back then, we used it in the Adobe Excel client. Nowadays, we would be able to do that in Analysis Workspace, but when I did this, Analysis Workspace didn't exist. So I would make those dashboards and basically say, listen, we're going to do the 80-20 rule. We're going to give you all of what you need and leave us alone now. We answered your questions in this dashboard so that we could focus on more strategic stuff. And usually the company understands. They say, listen, don't you want us working on more strategic stuff? If so, help us to get a dashboard that will meet 80% of your needs, because that will really help our team to focus on the more interesting stuff and help to generate ROI for the organization.
Okay. I think we're about at time. I mean, 2 minutes before. I just wanted to let everybody know that we're going to be emailing everyone this content, the recording, links. I'm going to put this one last link in for everybody. This is a blog series by Adam that directly relates to the first part of the content that we were talking about. Why organizations struggle with digital analytics and how they can overcome that struggle. It's actually a multi-part, and when I say multi, I mean 21-part series. So it goes very in depth, and Adam is very generous to have his email address up there. If you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out. He loves to answer all of this, and we could probably go for another 45 minutes. But I wanted to finish with that. And if there's any other questions that we didn't get to, please reach out. And Adam, I'll let you give the final word.
Yeah, well, thank you so much to our friends at Adobe for helping put this on, and thank you all for attending. I hope that this was a nice little diversion from the craziness that's going on right now, and I hope that you can take some of the lessons learned here. As an older person in the field, someone who just turned 50, I try my best to pass on things that I've learned so that people who are younger and newer into the field don't have to step on the landmines that I stepped on. And so I'm hopeful that you can take some of the advice here and that it helps you become more strategic at your organization with digital analytics. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.